to Paranormal Gumbo with your hosts, Angel and Aaron.
Welcome to Paranormal Gumbo. This is Aaron.
And this is Angel. Our show is going to be an interview with Miss Paulinne Delcour-Min. She's a past life and soul therapist. And for those of you who submitted questions to us online, we'll have the answers to those questions. We did ask her. I also want to remind you guys that if you have any stories, any paranormal stories, please send those in to us either at paranormalgumbo@gmail.com, or you can go to our website, www.paranormalgumbo.com, and we have a contact us form. You can fill it out, put out whatever you want. We can bring you on the show and let you talk about it, or we can just read about it. You can be anonymous if you want or not. It's up to you. Just, send those in because we really want to get that information. We want to have a part on the podcast where it's going to be your stories, and you can tell them or we can tell them, but we want to hear what you have to say because we always hear about all this famous stuff.
We don't know the local stuff. We want to know the down-home things.
Exactly. So it's really interesting. So fill that out for us. Also want to remind you that you can listen to us now on iTunes. So please go on iTunes and rate us. Give us a good rating, if you will. If you don't like what we have to say or how we do our podcast, send it to us in our contact us form or an email so we can know and we can change it and make it better, because we don't know what necessarily works until we hear from you guys.
Now, here's our interview with Paulinne Delcour-Min.
All right.
I'm in the northeast.
The northeast?
Yeah.
So, like near Scotland and all, right?
Near Scotland, yeah.
I love Scotland. I want to go there.
And her house, she was describing in the book, is by the sea there. And, I bet it's wonderful.
Fantastic. I can smell the ocean from here.
Well, the North Sea isn't an ocean. It's a lot smaller.
Okay. Well, it smells pretty much the same, though, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, that's seaweed, sand, salt, yeah.
Fish.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We're here on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, right here at the Gulf of Mexico, but that's not such a good smelling part of the ocean there.
Yeah.
Especially since the BP oil spill.
Oh, no, that was very bad.
Everything's dead out there.
It's terrible. And the whole fossil fuel industry should be winding down.
Yes.
Yeah, you would think so, but
dreadful disasters on the environment in all sorts of ways, hasn't it? I mean, global warming, the climate damage would be a more accurate term. Global warming sounds quite cozy, but climate damage is very different, and it's all these really weird storms and huge events with massive rainfall that we didn't used to have because the air's warmer, holds more water. The bigger catastrophes happen.
Yeah,
that's true.
You guys are going through a heat wave right now, aren't you? South of you guys in France it is.
I think in London it's a lot hotter.
Yeah.
We're a little bit further north, and the sea keeps the temperatures stable. You don't get the extremes when you're by the sea.
Yeah. See, that's like with us. It's always, in the summer, it's about 5 degrees cooler, and in the winter, it's about 5 degrees warmer for us, just because of the Gulf breeze.
Yeah.
It's pretty much
I think we have a bigger temperature range.
Yeah.
Yeah, here it's pretty much just different levels of heat through spring, summer, fall, and winter. It's just different levels of heat. We wear shorts at Christmas, so.
Oh, right.
Yeah. But first of all, are you really 71? Is that correct?
I'm really
Not
71.
look 71. I was amazed when I read that. I had to do a double and triple take because I just could not believe you were 71.
Yeah, she's over here checking her math, and I'm like, oh, there's no way she's 71
No
freaking
way.
years old.
When is your next book coming out?
I'm editing it at the moment. The editor's read through, and she's just sent me the script, and I'm just checking through. So this is just the next few days now, and then it should be out before the end of the year. Last time for Spiritual Gold, I signed the contract in January, and it came out at the end of August in America and a bit later in England. I signed the contract in January again this year, and although just a few weeks later at the very end rather than at the beginning. So I'm thinking it'll be about the time scale will be the same. It should be out in the autumn, although they never tell you. You
Right.
just find out when these things happen. But I think it'll be the autumn.
Wonderful. That's awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
It's going to be a good read. Yes.
I'm sure this one was as well. I just, I read through it. I want to read through it again because I kind of went through it, a little quickly, but it's such a smooth read. You have a really nice way of writing, and it's just smooth, and
Oh,
I
thank you.
enjoyed it. I really did. More than I even expected to.
Oh, well, that's lovely to hear. It did take a long time to write it. And, I haven't got an English degree. I was an art teacher, but I haven't got, these people do MAs in creative writing and stuff. I just had like high school English. I've always liked writing. And so it's taken about 11 years to get that book out. But you do a draft, and then you have a break, and next year you'd read it again and you'd go, oh, no, this is a bit lumpy and not smooth. What am I really trying to say here? And then you just keep refining it.
Right.
Basically, what I'm saying is anybody can write a book if there's something you want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not anybody can make it sound, like it flows. And, sometimes
Yeah.
you read a book and
That was
not
that was
such-
elbow grease and polish. That was just going over it and
That's
thinking,
how you do
don't
it.
need this sentence. I could say this a bit more succinctly. I was terrified of boring people. And you think, well, you need to say it in a nice, concise way so that you aren't going to lose your reader.
Right.
Yeah, I've read somewhere it's
Exactly.
just you've got to power through, but sometimes you get that one rare book where it's just like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm already finished with this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
That's a good thing.
I was really, it's was one of those where when you get to the end, it's kind of like when you read a good book and you get to the end, it's almost like losing a best friend or something, and you're like,
sweet.
oh my goodness.
And I think a lot of people felt that because people have often said the only negative thing they could say was they wanted more.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the best thing you can hear as a writer, I'm sure.
It
Yes.
is. It is.
So before we get started talking a little bit more in depth, I do have some questions from some of our listeners. We're a new podcast, so we don't have a lot of listeners yet, but we're working on it. But do you, Aaron and I both are really interested in the whole past life regression and being regressed and just the whole concept, period. Do you have anyone in the United States that you would recommend as a contact for that?
I have never been to the United States, so there isn't anybody I know there.
Okay.
I do know Ozark have their own training program for
Right.
the Taurus Canon type of regression. So they will have a list of practitioners who've trained with them. So that would be one avenue to explore, see if there's anybody near there. There's lots of different ways to do past lives. But basically, it's how you feel about the therapist. They say that you get the most out of any therapy. It doesn't matter what it is. It's how you feel about the therapist. So if it's somebody you like and somebody you trust, you'll open up, you'll go in deeper, and you'll get some good stuff out. So it's you and the chemistry with the person, I think, rather than any particular technique or any particular, school of regression.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I found it interesting that Dolores used to use the technique where you go into such a deep hypnosis, and then yours is not even really a hypnosis, correct? Am I correct?
Yes. I'm not a hypnotherapist. I'm not saying it's that different, because I have worked with a hypnotherapist, you know, my friend Veronica, who I did a lot of the regressions with. And it's just a quicker way to get you into that inner world, really.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the idea of going down steps and being counted, or you yourself counting the steps and then into a corridor and doors, I think hypnotherapists will use that as well. So there's been a lot of merging of ways to do it. I think the way I do it takes longer to get you relaxed and to get you into that state, but conversely, you then feel safer. I've had hypnotherapists say to me, do you have to take people out of scary times to a safe place and then put them back? And I've never had to do that.
That's a good point.
Because I've built up the trust in that slow start, so they know that they're safe.
Yeah.
That's
like you said, it's trust. A big thing about what you do, I'm sure, is trust.
It is. It is.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll check that out. That's a good idea. With the practitioners too as well. I do remember a while back seeing something like that. So it's just such an interesting subject. But so I guess first of all, let us know. I know that our accents are a little bit different from what you're used to hearing since we're in the South in the United States. But if you have any trouble understanding us or anything, please, let us know.
No, you're very clear. Can you understand me?
Yes, yes. You have a beautiful accent.
Oh, thank you.
You've got that mix right between Scottish and English. It's perfect. Perfect.
Oh, right.
Yes, Aaron's, I don't guess obsessed is probably the right word, but he very much enjoys the whole topic of Scotland.
I love Scotland.
Yeah, he wants to go there really, really badly. We just didn't.
I think you've had past lives there then.
Maybe.
Did you feel to certain countries and you want to visit?
Mm-hmm.
And very often you have got history there.
Really? That'd be amazing.
Could be. Yeah, we just did an episode on Nessie, and it was funny because he told a story. You talk about the whole past life thing, and he was telling a story in the last episode that he had a friend who his mother was from Scotland, and Aaron has, I don't know if you're familiar, but a Cajun accent from Louisiana.
I don't think I've got the accent anymore.
You do, but it's not as thick as it used to be. It used to be much thicker, but it's funny because nobody could understand her accent being from Scotland, but Aaron could understand her accent and she could understand Aaron's accent, so they would talk and nobody could understand either one of them.
It's like we would have
he could understand her accent really well, though.
Yeah, we're carrying on a conversation. I look over at another friend of mine. He's like, "What the hell are you guys talking about?" I'm like, hey, what do you mean you can't understand her? What's wrong with you? It's the weirdest damn thing in the world. I loved it.
Well, the scenery on the west coast is truly amazing in Scotland. There's some really, really beautiful views and the sky. It is a good place to visit. The east coast is a lot flatter and less dramatic, but you've got ancient cities like Edinburgh, and it's not a big country. If you hire a car and drive around, you'd have a wonderful time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, one day I'm going to do it. One day.
One day. All right. So, basically,
you could research some things for your channel.
Yeah.
For Paranormal Gumbos. If you go to Scotland, you can do some programs because there's castles and haunted battlefields and all sorts of things. And then there will be local people. Perhaps you could set up meetings and interview them and things.
Yeah, we're going to be doing something similar in New Orleans, where we're going to go spend a couple of days in New Orleans, and we're going to with the voodoo priests and some of the haunted cemeteries and haunted houses around there. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
I love New Orleans.
Yeah. And of course, there's a lot of UFO sightings. You know Philip Mantle, don't you? Mm-hmm. Well, there was Bonnie Bridge Triangle and things. So if you ask Philip, he might suggest some places, and then you could tie a lot of your Paranormal Gumbo things up, and then you'd have a tax-deductible thing for the taxman.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I've got one question for you that's not related to the interview at all. Have you ever tried gumbo?
No, I believe it's a dish with lots of different things in it. I didn't know what gumbo was, but I have a friend who's been to America who explained it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Don't put tomatoes in it.
All right.
Yeah, a lot of people put tomatoes in it. I'll send you a recipe. No tomatoes.
It is, yeah, it's a really delicious dish. But the reason that we called our show Paranormal Gumbo, for one thing, it's a cultural thing because here in the South, gumbo is from this area. But for another thing, gumbo, you basically throw just about everything in it except for the kitchen sink. The more ingredients, the better. And so that's kind of with our show. We want to cover a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and just as much as we can. So that's kind of where that came from.
Yes, I thought that was good because it means you've got quite a wide catchment for the topics.
Mm-hmm.
Right, definitely.
Yeah, we don't focus on just one thing. We want a little mix of everything.
Yeah. So I guess we need to go ahead and get started because I don't want to waste too much of your time. But first of all, thank you so much for talking to us. We really, really appreciate it so much. And we've been looking forward to it very much.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to it too.
If if we're gonna ask you quite a few questions, forgive us if we seem a little ignorant, with some of them, because some of this is kind of hard to wrap your mind around, definitely, but and probably honestly more so for Aaron because I've studied up on more this thing more than Aaron has, so
I'm more of the straight man in a bunch of things. I hate to say it, but I'm more of the skeptic on some things.
Yeah. You're not really a skeptic. You're kind of between. You have a healthy skepticism, but you're interested in things. It's more of a healthy skepticism, yeah. Which I am too, but I'm also one of those people that if I went to Loch Ness, I would see the Loch Ness Monster in every stick that's floating in the water.
And I would be the one jumping in the water.
But anyways, okay, so the first, okay, Aaron's going to run and get some water, but while he's gone, I read about your mom in the book and the issues that she had, and I can certainly, thank you, Aaron, I can certainly, relate to a certain extent because I've got, a lot of issues with depression with people in my family, myself included, but do you think that you would have come down this path of spiritual healing had you not been through what you've been through with your mom?
Quite possibly not. No, because you're always thinking, how could I have helped? How could I have changed the outcome? What could I have done? And that thought just make you very open to other forms of healing, and you want to know more.
Mm-hmm. Right. And what would you call yourself? I called you a past life regressionist, but you said you're not. I also called you a spiritual healer. What would you call yourself?
I call myself a past life and soul therapist.
Past life and soul therapist. Okay.
Because the way I do past lives does sort of touch the soul, and it helps to heal the scars on the soul. That's what they call samskaras that we carry with us from life to life. So it goes deeper than just a story, because there's the shamanic element where, the medicine rattles and things and sounds and colour and focus, and you help the person to heal the various things that it could be old wounds. It could be perhaps they lost their head. You might have to get the angels to pull the head back, cleanse it, and relocate it on the etheric body. There's lots of things that you may have been walking around with the arrow in you that killed you, that is still there in the etheric body, it could be causing physical problems, but clairvoyance would be aware of it, although you wouldn't see it. And then that might need removing. And if you've had poison, if that's how you died, there could be a poison residue energy that could be released. There's all sorts of things. And sometimes we've cursed ourselves. How could we have done this? Oh dear. And then we curse ourselves. And then that curse because it was done with such emotion, carries through into future lives and can affect things. Mm-hmm. And if you vow to love somebody forever, and, you know, perhaps this love of yours was going off to war and never came home, nobody else would ever feel quite right. You couldn't, it could ruin your relationships for lives to come.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. So do you feel like you had ever had any lives before with your mother?
That's a very interesting question. They've never come up.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, that's a very interesting question. That there was one Native American life, actually, when I think about it, when she did remind me of the mother I had in that life, who was incredibly nosy, and she'd want to know everything, including what your dream was. And there was just something about that woman in that past life that reminded me of my mum, but I couldn't say it was her. But that's a very good question. When you think what a key role my mum had for me, you would expect lots of karmic connections, wouldn't you?
Right.
I just think it says in the beginning of the book, though, I knew I had a link with my father.
Right.
But I think they'd married the wrong people, and I'm not sure I did have a connection with her. Mm-hmm. She was just the lady married, and therefore she became my mother because I had this pre-birth contract to be his child, to come down to him. I think the universe has a plan, but it's also multidimensional and very variable, and it will go on healing. So if you don't stick to the plan, then a whole lot of other potentials open up, and the universe will use these, and it will use these for your healing and move everybody involved along on their pathways, because basically the universe is a massive machine, if you like, for evolution in a spiritual sense. Worlds are evolving, solar systems are evolving, people are evolving, and we're here to have experiences. We learn, we change, we grow, and we're on a journey that will eventually bring about our healing. And that's what karma is. It's cause and effect. So you set things in motion, you have to experience it.
Right.
That's fantastic.
One of the things that, and I don't know that you really have any insight into this or not, but, you know, since I was a child, me, like so many other people, have grappled with this whole issue of, okay, you know, there's a God. Well, how did God come to be? And, you know, why? I know that we're students here on the earth, but, you know, why did we come to be? You know, and all these things. What are your views on the whole God, how God may have come to be, or what we're here for?
I'm not sure at our level we could actually understand that. Mm-hmm. Although, you know, from the book that I did have that experience with after the fasting and the connected breathing, where I saw the light of God come in me, and I realized I was like a little droplet of God, if you like, in the body. And I saw vistas of my other lives on other worlds and danced with death. And that experience is in there. And this is the same, that's true for everybody. Right. It was just the fasting and the flooding of the brain with oxygen that triggered that memory. And in a way, God is beyond the physical universe. And God may be all that there is, literally all that there is. And then part of it gets projected out, and you have a cosmos, and you have these worlds, and you have these beings, and you have evolution taking place. And then that is enrichment for the creator, because those experiences are the fruits of creation, and we take them back into divine mind when we return, in between our individual incarnations and in between the end of the entire universe when that goes back. Mm-hmm. I think there are various waves of creation. I don't think this is the first that we're experiencing.
Right.
I think there may be more, but whether there's anything beyond that, the totality of God, I don't know. Will some being tap God on the shoulder and say, "Oh, you've woken up"? That's, you know, I really couldn't say.
That's interesting. I've never thought of it quite like that, Aaron. Have you? That maybe, God is everything, all there is. I haven't thought about that before.
And I think that's why they say that's one of the names of God, isn't it? All that is.
That's true.
Yeah.
True.
So I think really that is the case. It's all that is. It's at such a high level, it doesn't exist in a physical sense. It's like pure thought, pure love, pure compassion, pure bliss. And that bliss is very static. So in fact, we're getting into the territory for book 2 here. We're getting into the Holy Ice book, because I look at darkness and light and the duality that does this dance that forms the creation, the fruits of creation that go back into divine mind. That was in there. And it's like God breathes out and you have this coalesce of energy which becomes the worlds and the universe. And then that's like the Big Bang. And then you have all the things that happen, and then suns die and worlds are born, and we have life after life, and we have all sorts of experiences, and then we go back.
One of the things that you talked about too in the book is how after we die we go back to source, and we're enveloped in source, and we're just kind of, we're there. But that's really hard for me to understand, and for a lot of people to understand. And I think of, okay, if after I die I go back to source and I'm just there, how would I not be bored? I guess I don't fully have that concept, but it just like it would be so.
Yeah, how would you not be bored? Yes, I did ask Archangel Michael that once, because angels are just endlessly praising God, and I thought, well, how could they not be bored? And he said, well, you just don't understand angels to think that, because we're at a level where we would be bored. But and if I'm in the presence of a higher being like an angel, after a little while I get very uncomfortable, because the darkness within me starts to activate and I can't hack the bliss for long. But when you're actually when you die, you go into the spiritual world, and that has many levels. It wants you to be comfortable. It doesn't want to have to increase the shock of transition, say. So you have levels which are more illusion. You have what you believe, and you have that for as long as you need it, and then you move up and things get more and more abstract. People who have studied and like yoga adepts and things, they'd go straight to a high level, because they wouldn't need to have that cushioning effect. People who've never really given it much thought may want to meet their loved ones and have almost like a parallel life to the earth life in a slightly higher dimension, and then they'll be ready to move on. But when you get into the spiritual realms, into the realms of light, like the angels, you're not bored, but some of your karma might start to irritate. Like we get a stone in our shoe when we're walking, and it's all right for a few steps, and you think, oh, I'll leave it. And then it starts to get to the point where you think, I've got to take my shoe off and get this stone out. Yeah. Well, it's a bit like that in the spiritual worlds. So the best way to shift karma is to have another life. So the guides and angels will gather around you, and they will help and give you advice, and they will set up connections. They'll set up the events that you'll need, and the choices and things. And you do have a say in choosing your parents. Sometimes we're in a hurry and we go, oh, they'll do. And that's always a mistake. But from the spiritual world, things look so much easier. And when you hit the treacle, when you come down into this level, we thought we could deal with this, we thought we could deal with that, we were put in that dodgy relationship, and a broken heart, and it's so much more difficult when we're actually here. And sometimes people have been over ambitious. They've planned all sorts. They want to get all these stones out of their shoe, and they've perhaps taken too much on board. And then the life plan might need to be reconsidered, or they may take a different route, and they may go into a period of ill health which slows them down and changes things, like ME or something, where you just couldn't do what you were going to do, and you have to rethink and reschedule.
Right.
You can only look at tendencies. Every specific person is going to have a unique set of circumstances that have brought them where they are, but it's not random, and it's not a cruel universe. It only appears that when we see things out of context, when we're looking at them through the lens of one life and the one personality of the body that we're inhabiting, things can seem cruel. But what you need to ask yourself is, what did I want to learn here? And once you start to ask that, you can let that situation go, because you may have actually then encapsulated the karmic lesson. You've shaken the grit out of your shoe, and the things that aren't needed will just fall away as you move through your life.
Right.
There's no easy answers, but it's like suffering isn't in vain. It is teaching you something, and it's not exactly getting you brownie points, but it's like it's trading off against other things. You won't have to suffer twice for your karmic balance. You may be suffering in a different way to the way you'd originally planned, but it's never wasted.
Yeah, I read in your book, and I've, as a student of Buddhism, I've seen this in other publications as well, and I completely agree with it, that when you have something painful happen in your life, you go through something difficult, you can just look at it as you're burning off that karma, basically.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
just rid of bad karma, and
Yes.
it'll be a good thing in the long run, even though it's difficult now.
Yes, because it will change you. It's like a potter makes a pot. That pot has to go into the kiln. It has to get really uncomfortably hot. It has to begin to melt and vitrify. It comes out as porcelain. It comes out beautiful. And that's really us. In our lives, we go into the kiln, and we have these really intense experiences. But when we come out, when we die, we have transformed. And I just get lost for words sometimes.
That's okay.
But it really is a beautiful process. It just looks cruel and random when we're looking at it from our viewpoint now. But when you, as a past life therapist, you see these things working out in a bigger scale. You see it working out for the clients you've had and in your own life. And there are reasons for things, and that the reason is usually to teach us something. So the minute we say, what's the lesson? Oh, right, change of values. It's like, money isn't that important, love is more important, or whatever the lesson is. Once you've learned that, then you don't need to have that lesson repeating. You might get a test a bit later, further along the line, to see, did she really learn it?
I've noticed that myself. I'll go through something and I'll think, well, I've got a good grasp on that now, and then it comes up at a different time, and I realize, well, I didn't have as good of a grasp on that as I thought I did.
That's exactly. You'll get a test. Yeah.
I've got one question for you on the karma and everything, and this is probably going to sound a little bit weird, but Harold Shipman is one of England's most prolific serial killers.
Yeah.
What's he to expect whenever he dies? Whenever he comes back, is he going to be an a-hole for the rest of eternity, or?
Well, no, that would be a terrible waste of the energy that's in his spirit, and he's only one manifestation of that spirit energy. He will need to experience what is set in motion. He will need to, when he's having his life review, he will have to feel what those people he killed felt. You will actually have to experience that, and hopefully that will teach him. It's like you get more and more tender-hearted the more spiritually evolved you are, because the more times you've been through that life review and had to feel how it was for the other person.
Okay. Well, on that note, go ahead. I'm sorry.
He will have to learn. So next time he's planning a life, the angels and the guides will be looking at what it is he's got to learn, and what's the best way for him to do that. We don't always come as human. We don't always come to the earth. God isn't a cruel and vengeful God, and we are in a way God as well. So it's like we're our own teachers and our own pupils, and we just want to learn. So it's not about blame and guilt and punishment. but it's about owning what you did and feeling that. And when you feel that, you can't do that to other people.
Well, on that same note right there, why would, okay, if he came back from a previous life, why do some people turn to killing? Why do some people turn to evil?
Well, people turn to evil because we all have to explore it in our lives at some point. Right, we do. We all do. There's nobody who's totally squeaky clean. Because that's part of our job. We have to go to each pole, and then we find our way back.
Okay.
So, you know,
look at there.
Yeah. So it's like we have to abuse power. We have to abuse people. We have to do things at some point.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we wouldn't be learning all the things that we need to learn. But why did he do that? Perhaps he himself was killed and felt powerless.
Yeah.
Perhaps he was one of the, I don't know what happened to him, but there will be a reason for why he did that. It could have happened in childhood, but he must have felt terribly powerless, and he wanted to have this power of life and death over people who trusted him.
Yeah.
And so there's a bigger picture at play there.
Yeah.
And then the karmic links between him and his victims, I couldn't begin to guess at what they were.
Yeah.
You know, an innocent little old lady today, who knows what she was in a previous life.
Exactly. Hey.
But that person, that little personality was innocent and had this dreadful thing happen. But it's not in a vacuum, you know, there's a reason.
Yeah. Okay, I got you.
Everything's just so connected, and you know,
Yes.
it's like a spider web. It's amazing when you stop to think about just all the different connections.
That's it.
But you know, one of the things, was that all, Aaron, for them?
Yeah.
One of the things that fascinates me, I'm more of a spiritual person than a religious person, and there are things as far as religion that have always concerned me, you know, being judgmental of other people, and sometimes the violence, and you know, the things that have happened in religion over the centuries. But you know, I have a little bit of a hard time when it comes to spiritualism versus like the Bible. You know, you've talked about in your book how you've basically been intertwined with you know, a path with Jesus, you know, all this time, and I know that as a human, the Bible has been in so many different men's hands, and they've changed things, cut things out, and that kind of thing. But what are your general thoughts about the Bible?
The Bible is a record of Jewish history. And then on the end of it, there's this tacked on bit from the Christianity side of things after Jesus came. But the Bible wasn't written until a long time after Jesus died. Mm-hmm. It was written really after the people who knew him had died as well. And it's hearsay, it's letters that were sent, and it got incredibly manipulated once the Romans took it as the official religion, and they were using it to control people. So it certainly isn't the pure teachings of Jesus. Parts of them are in there, a lot of them was lost. So the life where I was in the early Christian church was before the Bible was written. Mm-hmm. And it was a very joyful religion, and the fish was a symbol, and the cross is only a much later symbol for Christianity, and that's to do with death and control. We'd have thought that was very morbid.
Right.
Yeah, and it has just been cut about for political reasons, and it's also been badly translated. It would have been in Hebrew, it would have been in Greek, it would have been in the ancient tongues, and it's been translated time and again into Latin and all the rest of it, and then into English, and it's been cut about because, you know, when you're doing a translation, you can pick out of the words that resonate with the particular Greek word, and you can make a slightly different construct. So the Bible's the Bible, but you shouldn't quote it and judge people because of what it says. And Jesus did not talk about hell and punishment. He talked about the mansions of the Heavenly Father, where you basically got what you needed to help you learn on your spiritual evolution journey. You didn't get punished. Whereas a great tool for controlling people is to go on about hell and damnation and judgment, isn't it? So that's been ramped up.
Right.
And the focus has been shifted to big that up. And I think that's been dangerous and cruel. And guilt and shame are bad things for people and heavy burdens to carry. But I mean, we should be living a good life, and we should be living the thoughts and the teachings that Jesus brought us, because he was sent with a message because we needed it. There's a lot of female scholars now looking at the very early text of the Bibles, and they're finding a lot has been cut out about the goddess side of God, and the patriarchy element is really bigged up God as him, and that they've distorted the message. And you know, that thing about how you have dominion over all the animals and stuff, that's given us carte blanche to trash the world, and that's not what God meant at all. We're to be stewards of the planet. We're not just to be ruining it and lording it over all the other life forms. You know, we've got extinctions on a massive scale at the moment, haven't we? And environmental catastrophes. And it's like people have been given a wrongful authority by the mistranslations and deliberate manipulations of what's in the Bible, I think. I mean, that's my opinion.
I agree.
I've got one question for you about God. You said that you don't always come back human. You don't always come back to Earth.
Yep.
These other beings that you can come back as, do they perceive God the same way that we do?
As the creator, as the highest form of love, as the moving spirit behind things, yes. It's like the angels. They don't incarnate on Earth, do they? But you couldn't say they don't exist. Even the angels are in the Bible. And there are lots of higher dimensional beings. There are lots of children of you know, our heavenly divine parent that we don't see, including the ones in other worlds. And I would say they probably have a much clearer idea of God than we do. The higher evolved ones. I mean, but people on Earth can access their divine heritage. You know, like that experience I wrote about. Well, there's lots of people have had that experience. That's the classic Buddhist enlightenment experience, isn't it? You know, it certainly wasn't unique to me. And it wasn't a state I live in. It was just a moment when the veil of matter parted, and I saw things I couldn't normally access and understood things in a very different way, like the purpose of pain and dancing with death, and how death is a dear friend who takes us out of impossible situations. And
I have a really important question now. What's your kitty's name?
my
Cat.
It's Fizzy. She's a grand old lady. This is Fizzy here.
Oh,
Grand old lady.
one of the things that you wrote about in the book that touched me, you know, you said in your book that you were having a time when you were exhausted all the time, and one of the things you looked at it a different way. I think, if I remember right, you had gone to see someone about it, a healer or something. If I remember right, I may have this wrong, but and one of the things that you kind of discovered was you wasted so much time worrying about doing things that it exhausted you and used up all your energy. And
Yes,
since
I remember.
yeah, and since I read that, I don't know, that resonated with me a lot. I know it sounds simple, but you don't necessarily think about it that way when you're caught up in the situation. And I do find that to be true because, you know, I've tried to integrate that into my life since I've read it, and that has helped tremendously.
It was
So,
like driving with the handbrake on.
right, yes, I remember that analogy. And that's when you had that analogy in there, I thought, that's exactly how I feel. So I want to thank you for that, because that was very helpful, and there's no telling how many other people that with that small part of the book that you will help.
Yes, and that was one of the things I realized when I had that enlightenment experience. And I'd been to see the herbalist, and it was through the herbalist I went on the retreat in Spain when we did the fast and we did the connected breathing, and I had that experience.
Another one of the things that I found interesting, you talked about in your book about these basically negative creations that we've made with our minds around the earth. Do you feel like, not really like a devil necessarily, but just that negative force?
Yeah, I do. I think there is a great volume of energy that is trying to wreck things, cause destruction, and feed from that, and throw you off your path. And but you have to persevere, and it's teaching you to be stronger, isn't it? It's not, you just think, oh, I'm not going to let that win. Right. And if you're experiencing that sort of resistance in your life that's stopping you, I think it just needs to make you more determined, and you'll win through.
Do you have any situations where you see spirits, or where you have an intuition that would come from, spirits or anything like that?
I don't see spirits. I do get intuitions. I may wake up knowing things in the morning, like I've had some teaching at night, when we're on the higher levels. If I'm doing any inner work, I ask the archangels that I work with for protection. That's Archangel Michael. He's brilliant. And Archangel Gabriel, Archangel Uriel, and Archangel Raphael. So when you've asked that team of archangels to look after you, they do keep you safe. I do believe that. And your own guardian angel.
Come back next week for the conclusion of our interview with Paulinne Delcour-Min.
If you've got anything you would like for us to cover, let us know. Let us know the name of it, the general area. We'll do some research, and we'll have it on a show later.
Yeah. Go to our website, www.paranormalgumbo.com. You can fill out the Contact Us form. Tell us whatever you'd like us to cover. Tell us what you like about us, what you don't like about us. Be kind, but be honest. And, that's how we make our show better. But we really want more feedback from you guys, because we want you to be a part of the show. We want to hear your voice. We want to tell your story, because most people have a paranormal story, and you don't want to necessarily tell that to your friends, because maybe they won't believe you or whatever. But you can tell us. We'll talk about it anonymously or with your name, however you want to do it, or you can come on the show like we said before.
And as always, we'd like to thank MacNarb Gaming for giving us a place to actually do the podcast. Never Ready Gamers for actually helping us with information on how to actually conduct the podcast and use of some of their equipment. And one other company, Burnham Drugs here in Gaucher. They're helping us out as well with space as well. So we'd like to thank those three. And as always, don't burn the roo.
That's right. Don't burn the roo.